Welcome, everybody. Today we are joined by Kelsey Cooper, the host of the Disabled Birth Story podcast. Kelsey created this podcast after recognizing that there was a lack of conversation surrounding pregnancy and disability. In this episode, the hope was to capture a conversation to inspire and support mothers with disabilities and their birth teams. Today we'll be exploring the broader issues surrounding pregnancy and disability, from the barriers faced in the healthcare to the ways that the birth team can create inclusive, supportive environments for all families. We've also created a free resource to support families. I'll leave the link in the show notes. A beautiful thing happened after this conversation with Kelsey. A woman contacted me and asked for support, and she told me that she had a disability. As a former nurse, I felt my insecurities rising up, telling me that I should know everything about her condition and how to manage it during a pregnancy. And then I remembered very quickly this beautiful conversation that I had recorded with Kelsey. And I chose to come to the conversation with a beginner's mind. And I listened, I asked questions, and I met her as a soul, as a woman, and a mother. The universe works in mysterious ways, and I was so grateful for this experience. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to our Women's Circle that is happening on the 27th of October. That is a Sunday. This event will include a water womb meditation and a womb massage that we'll do together. You can find all the information in the show notes. I really hope that we can see you there. Before we begin, let us drop into our body. Welcome in a deep breath in, noticing all the areas that expand your body. And as you exhale, welcome in a softness throughout your body. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing this conversation with us. Welcome, Kelsey, to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to learning more about you. So, I know you have a podcast. You're a fellow podcaster. I'd love to know
Yes.
about that. And I'd also love to know how you got to this point of advocating for people who have disabilities.
Yeah, I guess to start, I would have to go and tell about my life and how it's gone and about me is that I have a disability myself, and I'm married, and so does my husband. We actually have the same disability, but it affects each of us differently. When I got married, the reason I started the podcast is I've always loved birth, loved everything about birth. I think I started watching a birth story on TLC when I was 8. That's how I got into birth and those things. When I got married, I started to think about what childbirth for me would look like and people with disabilities because I'd never really looked into it. Are there any precautions or anything I need to do in order to prepare for birth or anything like that? And so I started to just Google going down rabbit holes and I couldn't really find anything. And I was already into birth and birth podcasts, and I would listen to those and try to find things. And it's very scarce. And I was like, if I'm having trouble finding it, maybe other disabled people are also struggling to find things. I enjoy birth podcasts, and I thought, I mentioned to my husband, what about this birth podcast? And he was like, if you want to start one, I'll support you. And so we just jumped in it together, and I do the podcast and he does the behind the scenes stuff.
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
So we have cerebral palsy with the classification of spastic diplegia. So we are affected mostly from the waist down. I have some gait issues and balance issues, and then it affects the dexterity in my hands, but I can walk and move around independently. And there's spasticity and tightness in our muscles from the brain damage. For my husband, he uses forearm crutches and braces or AFOs. He cannot walk unassisted. He has the same classification as me as well. It affects both his legs and the dexterity in his hands as well. So that's just a little bit about our disability and how it affects us.
Thank you so much for sharing. And how beautiful that this lack of information brought you to this point for you both to create this together. It's incredible. And I'm curious to what you've learned from the community that you're building right now. What have you learned from the people there who are maybe sharing about the support and information within their physical communities?
Mhm. I've found that they're having trouble too and wanting to know if they can even have a baby, how to have a baby. I found they had the same concerns as me and how to go about speaking to a doctor, how to find a doctor that would take them and consider their disability because everyone's different, every disability is different. So how do we find doctors that can support us and things like that?
Mm. Does it seem that doctors are not prepared for these situations?
It depends on the area, but I would say for the most part, yes. I guess for specific disabilities, everyone's different, so it's hard to facilitate so many people and their birth, um, focusing on each one. I've heard of people having trouble with doctors. They come in and the doctor hasn't looked into their disability or their chart information to figure out the best. They have to
Mm.
advocate for themselves and say, what about this? What about that? And having doctors who maybe look at their chart and say, oh, we have a person coming in who has this disability. Let's be prepared, see what we can do to support them before they even get here. So that's what I see most is wanting to find someone with experience with a specific disability, which is hard because there's so many,
Yeah.
but just being prepared prior to, I think would help a lot.
Mm. Yeah, and then I suppose it's a lot for then the parents to step into this experience with the right questions as well. And I feel from your podcast with sharing stories, there's so much wisdom in sharing stories and just hearing people around the world and their experiences and how they've managed to support themselves and maybe the questions that they've asked or the things that they've come up against. It helps people to step into these situations because it might be asking the questions that the doctor would never ask and they would just be put
Mhm.
on this on the path that the doctor thinks is right or maybe the only thing that they know. So it's like also helping to educate the system as well through this
Mhm.
journey. What do you think is the best support that we can give mothers and families in this time during pregnancy and childbirth in regards to each person's specific need? What would be the things that we would be looking at and exploring to support them during, let's just say, pregnancy to start with?
Mhm. I think, like I said, educating on their disability in general, and then asking specific questions about how that disability affected them both prior to pregnancy and how it changed once they got, what did you struggle with? What changed once you were pregnant? I think that's the huge one is being educated as much as possible and how things change along the pregnancy journey. Uh,
Hmm. Knowing the physiological effects of the pregnancy and what's
mhm,
going to happen in childbirth, plus being very aware of what's happening in your own body through this journey of
mhm,
becoming pregnant and holding space for that and knowing that it may be different than other people's experience who don't have the disability and how can I best support myself? Where can I find these resources?
mhm.
So, what with the community that you have and the mothers and the families that you're speaking to, what are the things that you've noticed when they say, "Oh, I wish I would have had this," or "This really helped me during pregnancy and childbirth"? Is there any things that stood out for you?
A lactation consultant that's worked with
Mm,
people with disabilities, looking for a doula that's worked with people with disability, like finding their community
Mm.
of people that they can trust and not have to, they don't have to advocate while they're in pain and trying to figure
Yes.
things out. Because I feel like even an able-bodied person wouldn't be able to advocate if they're in
Mm.
pain in certain times of the birth. And even during the pregnancy, there may be pains or days that are worse with a disabled person that they can't get up, get out, and do what they plan. Having the community there to take a load off and be able to say, I can't answer these questions right now, but she's very educated and take some questions if you need it to. Something like that.
That's
Or
so
or
powerful, so
passing it
important.
off.
Having the village around you to support you and preparing, I suppose preparation is key for all
Mm.
of this and being very upfront about what is happening within your own body, what you maybe expect to happen, what you want to experience, and how best they can support you at this time. And really communicating with the doulas, the lactation consultant, whoever is supporting you. This is what is happening in my body. This is what I understand. Like, how can we work together? How can we support this journey? And I wonder how much of this is blocked by communication, by not being able to speak their truth or like being able to ask for help. What have you noticed, maybe in your own journey about asking for help or like sharing what your needs are? Do you feel like from your own perspective that would be something that you've learned along your journey, or is it something that you're still working on to like actually fully receive?
With my own journey, I've noticed, and this is something I've noticed a lot in my podcast, but for my own journey, it's like disabled people are able to speak for themselves. I would always have doctors look to a parent to ask
Mm,
me questions. I'm capable. Ask me the question. Or just not making assumptions just because you see a disabled person and
mm,
say they're capable. And that's a big reason why I started the podcast is to not only for the disabled people to get their stories out, but for their able-bodied friends and family to realize they are capable of doing this. And not only family members, but the medical community as well. To
mm,
because it even crosses in the medical community. It happens with doctors, like I said, looking to my parents and saying, and mama having to ask her, just not making assumptions, not making judgments simply on just the fact that we're disabled. Yeah.
mm. Wow. How did that feel growing up when that happened to you?
You just learn to roll with the punches and just let it roll off my back. My mom was such a good support system either way. So either way it went, I knew that I was getting the best care, but it did hurt and not knowing that they didn't see me as capable or didn't
Mm,
see me as, but I just let it roll it off and kind of ignored it for a long time.
mm. And like the
So,
assumptions that are in the field as well.
mhm.
Is that ever like with the people that you're speaking to on your podcast, do you notice how these assumptions might there might also be projections about certain risks that aren't actually there, or maybe even
Mhm.
blind spots of looking away from what's actually happening and not fully stepping into it?
Mhm. I think one example I've heard a lot or that I've learned about in my groups that I'm in is that for my for our disability, it they always they want to immediately put not all the time, but go, this is a high risk pregnancy. Why?
Mhm.
Because you're disabled. But how does my disability affect that? I don't know. Just because I'm disabled doesn't automatically mean it's a high risk pregnancy. Now, there are disabilities that is the case that like everybody's journey is different, everybody's disability is different, but let's look at it and see what are the statistics, what is the evidence that this disability that I have and how it affects me actually makes me high risk. So,
Yeah, and that as you're saying that, I'm just thinking of how it could be put into this umbrella when actually we really have to get courageous enough in the birthing world to step into that mother's world and find out like what is really happening without maybe feeling embarrassed or afraid that you don't know everything. Like it's okay not to know everything. This person is here who is living with this, who would love to share with you what is happening in their internal world, would love to share their fears, would love to share with you their desires about this pregnancy and the childbirth. And I feel that I used to be a nurse, and I know from my own experience and being in that kind of community, there could sometimes be questions that were overlooked because of fear of maybe offending someone.
Hmm.
And that would basically be from their own insecurities. It's nothing to do,
Yeah.
they're not really thinking about the person.
Mhm. And a lot of it comes to me, everyone's different, but I would rather you ask the question than just assume something. So I'm not going to get offended by a question, whether you find it, as long as there's true information that needs to be gleaned or true curiosity. If you're just asking just to be rude, then yes, that's an issue. But I can tell that there's genuine curiosity or genuine information that needs to be gleaned, I have no issue with questions, and I
Mm.
would welcome them more than just assuming something and then going with your assumption first.
Yeah, for sure. And this is like across the board with families and friends, I suppose, in some ways too, because this developing the skill of conscious communication, knowing that we might trigger people sometimes with questions we ask, because we might
Mhm.
ask it in a way that sounds like it doesn't sound sensitive, but it's really checking in with our own intention. Like my intention is I want to show up for you, I want to support you. And also it's okay for the person who you're sharing with, like the way that you said that did offend me because of this. Could we use this language? And I just feel like language is so powerful. Like it can be the bridge for that deeper connection, or it can separate. And even if there is that feeling of separation, we can bring it back and make it stronger just by saying, hey, it made me feel like this, or we use this language. So I just feel like that is such a key factor, like communication and being able to hold that if someone's telling you, like, please don't say it like that, or when you said that, it made me feel a certain way. That's okay for someone to share that with you. It means they love you and it means that they want you to be with them and they want you to hold space for them. They just want different language to be used.
Mhm. For sure. I completely agree. And I think there could be, it's an educational moment, not a put down, or it's an opportunity for education on both ends.
Yeah, and maybe like the families as well and friends. Maybe they forget fully the extent of the disability as well sometimes, or they forget like the investigations that you've had around your disability and the pregnancy and like just some areas that have been spoken about. I feel like it's okay to say that, oh, I can't fully remember what you said. Can we repeat and go back into that point, what you were sharing with me? Because it can be that people can make things up, pretending that they remember, but they don't. And then they've lost that connection because there's always a part of us that knows what is happening underneath the words that we're saying. So if I forget and I'm pretending that I know, a part of you will for sure know and you'll feel it, whether it's just a weird feeling within the interaction or you leave it thinking something wasn't quite right there. There wasn't a full presence because there wasn't a complete truth within the conversation. Because in general, anyway, with an able-bodied person, there's so much with pregnancy going into postpartum, the things that we talk about, the things that we explore. So this is that plus an extra layer of curiosity with it all. Mm.
And then I get a lot the questions of, or the assumptions of, can they be a good parent? Can they do
Mm.
this? And so their motherhood and their parenting becomes um, a topic of, can they do this? And even in the medical field, I had a couple a person in particular on the podcast who got questioned about their disability or got a judgment based on it just simply because they were disabled and if they were able to care for their baby. And I've heard of in the community that happening a lot. People coming in and saying, "Can you change their diaper?" Yeah. Do you go to every room and ask if the
Mm.
mom can change the diaper? Do you ask every disabled person if they can change? Which is fine if you do, if that's protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you're doing it because you're making an assumption and you haven't even asked me questions yet.
Mm.
You know, um,
If you get to know that person and you get to find out what they can do in daily life anyway, then the question would more be like, would there be any extra support that you would need?
right.
Big shout out to our sponsor, Evolving Humans, who are the pioneers for energy healing. This practice that I was taught 4 years ago has been studied by researchers all around the world to provide evidence of the physiological effects of energy healing. And I'm not just saying this because it's a promotion, but I have used this practice every single day for 4 years, and personally, I've noticed the most impact in my emotional state. This energy practice taught me how to feel energy in my body and observe the sensations. The technique involves you using your hand and connecting to the energy field within your body. And with this gentle, loving awareness that you bring to the table, everything is seen and lived. The whole being comes into alignment. During the birth of my daughter, I tore, and the discomfort that I was experiencing with this tear started to ease up dramatically when I would use this technique. In the show notes, you'll find the link to Evolving Humans so that you can explore this healing technique, which is available through a course that you can join today.
Right. Yes. I think it's all about language and the intent behind what's being
Yes.
said.
And in the medical system, unfortunately, there can be a disconnect with humanity actually always sticking to the questions that we have to ask. You get a booklet probably and it has the questions in and it's, oh, they're written down. Like we should just ask them this way when we're interacting with another human being. There's a soul inside there that has feelings, that has emotions. This is even away from the medical system with families and friends that have these questions. It's to know when it's a personal fear as well,
Mhm.
rather than actually remembering that you know this person, or maybe you don't know them so well. And there's questions that there's things that you can get to know about them more, or you can ask, like, how can I best show up for you? And really supporting the reminding the mother of how families, of how powerful they are. Like, the parents, how powerful you are. Like, ask for what you need. We're in your tribe. We will support you. And even if there's moments of exploration, what can I use to support me once the baby's born? Like, how can I support my own healing? Then that can be an exploration with the friends and the family as well. Instead of like, I feel like the big word is just assuming human things, like thinking what's best for that person. Like, what, like they're a human being. They know themselves. And if they don't know because they don't have options, share the options. What options are available right now? That's the key
Mhm.
thing.
Especially if it's a person we've had mine specifically since birth. So people who have had long-term disability, they've lived with it for however old they are. Whereas you're
Mm.
seeing them for the first time for
Mhm.
12 hours, and then they're going to go home and you're never going to see them again, or you're going to see them in 6 weeks. How
Mm.
much information do you have in that short amount of time? And how much information do they have when
Mm.
they've lived it for however long, you know?
How common is it then from the stories that you've been hearing of having the change in support work within the healthcare system? Is it common for the midwife to change or the doctor to change, that they don't even know them and they're just showing up for their birth?
Not often people advocate so well being disabled. You advocate so well for yourself.
Yeah.
But I just mean nurses in
Yeah.
shift work because they do most of the heavy lifting as far as when you're in labor. And this administrative support staff in the hospitals,
Mm.
CPS need to stop by. Are they going to hound me with questions? Is a social worker going to stop by and hound me? There's legitimate fear, and then certain
Mm.
people with disabilities of, are they going to hound me with questions simply because I'm disabled?
Mm.
Are they going to question my parenting skills just because I'm disabled? So that's what I mean by they come in, they see a disabled person. You've only seen me for X
Yeah.
amount of hours,
Oh,
and you didn't
yeah.
even ask about my life experience.
Yeah. Wow. And how do you feel that, because this is such a journey on all levels, right? Especially like emotionally with the perceived ideas of what it means to become a parent when you're living with a disability, like in the collective. How do you feel that we can best support mothers through this time with the things that they're maybe faced with.
I think if they can afford it, or if you can find someone who um, is giving it for free, or perinatal counseling, or having someone there to, if this is hard for you, or if you have these worries, let's nip them in the bud at the beginning, or at least have someone in your corner from the beginning so that when we get to this point, um, if something comes up, we can talk about it. It's all about a support system.
Yeah. Have you noticed from the conversations you've been having that the doula support is they're
Mhm.
on top of this, or do you feel like there could be a need for like deeper education?
Oh, there definitely could be a need for deeper education. Since starting the podcast and looking for things, there have been doulas that have messaged me and said, can I have more information on how to support people with disabilities? How could we better learn about this? So I feel like there is room, but they're very open to learn. Are we going to be able to, as far as from a doula perspective, not only the pregnancy, but the birth, are we going to be able to birth how you typically birth in the lithotomy position? Are we going to be able to have the epidural? Are you going to be able to have this medication and that medication? Are you going to be able to move around? Are you a wheelchair user, or do you have other mobility devices that we need to consider? And how mobile are you? Things like that I've seen is just learning about those types of things of how to best give support one-on-one and how it's different from an able-bodied person.
Mm. Yeah, it's like going into that experience with knowing that it's okay that you don't know everything, because there is so many variations of what it will look like when you're working with somebody who is living with a disability, right? Like their needs are going to be different. And I feel that from a doula perspective or a birth keeper's perspective, of just remembering primarily this is a human being. There's a soul looking out at you, and they have needs, which primarily are the same physical needs, plus extra in some cases in different ways that we might not know. So it's like how getting into them conversations and also knowing it's okay to have fears come up, because there might be
Mm.
like, oh, I don't know enough, or who am I to support someone? But I can imagine that mother is like, ask me questions. Let's learn together. Let's see how we can support me and how I can share the information that I need before I go into giving birth. And then on the other side, what it's going to look like to receive that support. And I feel like there's such a beautiful role for a doula to have them deeper connections and also maybe ask questions to the mother that maybe she hasn't even thought about, like asking certain things, like having that connection to see different aspects of what could come up, and how best we can support the mother in them times to make sure that she is nourished, to make sure that her body feels as safe as it can, to make sure that she is held by people that love her. And I feel like this then can be rippled out to the community as well, like sharing that and role modeling it from that point of view of I'm here to be support for the mother and the baby and the family.
Mhm.
Mm,
For sure. I think that's the
mm,
biggest thing about all of it is being educated and not. And some people feel like they're tired of educating. They've been educating their whole life. They've been in this body their whole life. So it goes back to having an advocate, having someone to say, to take over the questions when you're tired of advocating, tired of educating. And it's okay to say, I don't want to answer that right now. But
mm.
or having support from family and them being willing to step in and say she doesn't need that right now, but what she does need is XYZ.
Yeah.
So I think having someone in your corner to
Oh,
take the load
yeah.
off when you've
Especially
done
when
it
you're in
for however
labor.
many years.
If you're
Mhm.
in labor, if you're in that portal, no one is there completely logically there. No mother is there. They are somewhere else. They're in a different realm. So whether disability or not, like having people there to voice their needs and their desires and being there is like the greatest gift because who knows like where she is going to be going when she is in that transitional stage. And then I feel like that stage lingers for a while in postpartum and most you just want to do is to come back, welcome your soul back into your body, let your body rest down. Like, what an amazing, incredible thing that is just done to hold this baby, to bring it earthside, whether it's been a vaginal birth or a cesarean, coming to the other side, to have people there to hold you, like to nourish you, to be there to care for your body, to help you get rest. It really feels so much as the community holding this whole journey, a community that is ready to maybe learn more, maybe show up in a different way than they thought they would show up, like showing up in the way that the family needs them in that
Mm.
moment and that being primary. I'm curious, what do you feel is still lingering around the collective, around like social stigma or misconceptions? I know you've touched on some stuff. Is there anything else that really is highlighted, what you've noticed from listening to stories that's still lingering in the collective?
I think the biggest one, and I've touched on, is just the fact that being disabled is, especially physically disabled, they immediately question whether they could even be a parent or a mother. And the just their ability to do day-to-day life with a child is the biggest thing.
And hearing that, it just breaks my heart. If someone was to ask it in that way, it's just like, oof, a total
Mm.
kick in the chest. With the communities that you're in, are you gathering together or within your own space resources for families to use? Are you collecting that in right now?
I'm trying, it's hard to find resources, but I'm trying to make a list and
Mm,
collect those. And having the podcast helps to reach out to people and see and finding information. I found a lot in the US and I found a lot of disability related support or
mm,
information overseas, especially in Australia,
mm,
England. Like they have just because a lot of people are go to social media. There's so much social media that I see from Australia and other places that are disability related resources, just in general, not even pregnancy related, but in general, it's huge from what my perspective. And so finding that here, I don't know if I just haven't dug enough. It hasn't been enough time, or we need to be better at, or a combination of both. But it's hard to find things in the first place and to
mm,
find people and have resources. But it's definitely getting better. It's
mm,
definitely, even since the pod, there's been doula trainings that people have let me know that
mm,
we're including segments on disability. We're
mm,
including segments on disability with water birth. We're
mm.
including it's there. It feels like it's becoming more of a thing, and hopefully I can get more resources in the long run.
That's incredible. You are doing such great work, honestly. And I feel like it's one of these areas that we need to shine the light on. It's something that we need to look at. And I feel like this isn't the job for the parents to do all this effort if they're pregnant or if they're in post, that's a lot to take on. It's for the birth keepers, it's for the doulas, like the midwives to really dig into this. And I feel like the doulas and the birth keepers and the midwives, they can be like this bridge because they have one foot in like the kind of say the medical system with the stuff that they know and the people that may be connected to, and also this side of what is happening on a human level, like what is happening on all levels, and how can we create this, or how can we encourage this curiosity and I feel very drawn to creating something with you. So maybe we could think about this before
Yeah,
the episode comes out and we can create like a resource. I have a lot of connections to doulas around the world and I can see what they have and we can bring something together so that either the families can use it or the doulas can use it as a way to explore language or explore where they can find information. Because that's the main key, right? As long as you know how to get the information, then that's the main point, right? And like, how can we
right.
communicate that? It's been so great to speak to you, and I would love for you to share where the listeners can find you.
Yeah, we're on Instagram at Disabled Birth Stories Pod, on Facebook at Disabled Birth Stories Podcast, on YouTube at that as well, and on TikTok, Disabled Birth Pod. And you can also email me at kelseycooper at disabledbirthstories.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And to your husband as well, what's his name?
Sam.
Sam. Well done, Sam. Like you two are doing such incredible work together. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Kelsey.